The reason I was able, or was the one who discovered the fire, is because I was up. I had a crew on Main Street, Sitka, cleaning different buildings. As I was driving down the street and come around the church, I noticed in the Peterson store, it looked like fog or steam or something coming out from underneath the door, and I stopped my car right there and got out and realized in a moment that it was a fire. A lot of townspeople started coming, and especially I had a crew on the street, and that's when we realized within just a few minutes that that fire was going to be uncontrollable. People were fighting the fire and hauling icons mostly, and after the church was pretty well, as far as the Orthodox Church was concerned, was almost destroyed by fire, I was called to ask if I knew anything about how to disassemble the organ at the Lutheran Church. We were able to get into the Lutheran Church, and everybody was moving all the furniture and everything out of the Lutheran Church because it was going to burn also. There were people everywhere, you know, helping to evacuate the furnitures of the stores and things out of the different stores that were going to be, that they could. And so there were, to me, dozens of people working. Particularly, the one thing that I really recall is that the chandelier in the church. 3 or 4 men stood and held one of the pews, like they have in the church today, one of the old pews, while one fella, and his name was Ken Smith, climbed on top of that pew and was steadied and took that chandelier down by himself. Now, I'm told that weighs 400 pounds.
We can see this red sky over on the Sitka side here, which told us, you know, oh, there's a big fire somewhere. And we can just about see the blaze from where we lived, you know. It's, the cinders were already flying over to Mount Edgecombe. And that was our biggest worry. Of course, I knew we were in trouble already because it was 4 below zero. And I think over here in Sitka, the water level was pretty low because of the freeze. There wasn't much water coming off of the mountains. By the time we got on the scene here, our job was mostly just to try to contain it. So I was detailed to go and work around the Lutheran church. But as we were working around that Lutheran church, the back side of it, we can just get enough just water just to the rooftop. And we were on the back side, we were standing on a block of a barrel of wood there because the cinders were floating on the water and it just looked like ground. So we were kind of standing on those barrels. I can't even remember the other guy's name because he was from Sitka helping out. And the big barrel of smoke had billowed around the building and kind of covered us up. It was for all these people that were standing and watching the fire, I think saved us. Because they all started hollering in unison that, you know, to get out of there. The back of the church was falling, you know, collapsing. And because we were right in the smoke, you know, I mean, we were trying to protect our eyes. And all we heard was for us to get out. And they were screaming and yelling. And we just dropped the hoses and we took off. By that time, my feet were just sopping wet, and 4 below zero, you know. I mean, you're kind of walking on your heels because you feel that your toes were going to drop off. So I decided to quit. Of course, it took me about 2 or 3 hours to thaw out. And I think I stayed home for about 3 hours. Get warmed up, changed clothes, and came back over. that was kind of sad, to come across and to see this church just kindled. There's not much anybody could do about it. Just to walk through the whole damaged area, that how lucky we were that we had a Lutheran church wall, had cemented walls, and a new Ben Franklin firewall that they had on their building. Kept the rest of the town from going up.
Many of the icons were just, at the time they didn't know what, they were going to do with them. Some were stored right there inside of the telephone company. Others people took to their homes. And they, after the fire and everything else, they put out a call for everything, so that they could find out what they had and what might have been lost. It was very uplifting to hear that, most everything that was taken out of the church came back, and was accounted for. And one of the icons that was lost in the fire was a large icon of the Last Supper, which was above the main royal doors that enter into the sanctuary. Just being held in the icon with just little tacks. And, ordinarily, you would just be able to rip that right off there, because the tacks were already 120 years old, and so on. But as they tried to get that icon down, they just couldn't get it down. And so many of the elders always said that, this icon was put up there when the church was consecrated, and it went down. God gives power to those who don't even know they have it.
I think we're all established here. So again, welcome tonight. I appreciate the big turnout. Really thank everybody for coming to commemorate all the efforts that continue to build and make Sitka a great place. My name is John Stein. I'm on the board of the directors of the Sitka Historical Society, and we really appreciate the work of the staff tonight and our panel members. And I will be taking questions from the panel, or to the panel, but first of all, we thought we would pass the mic down and ask folks to recount their adventure, if any, during that day. And Herman Davis is our honored guest here because we appreciate the use of the Sitka Nakahiki House for this meeting. So, Herman, do you have something to say? Herman was a firefighter, is that right? A firefighter at the during the fire, and from Mount Edgecombe High School, right? Or Mount Edgecombe? Oh, Sitka High. Okay. Do you want to make a comment, Herman? You want to make a comment?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Kind of a sad day on 1966 January 2nd. I was working at the Pioneer Home at that time. I was working the midnight to 8 shift with Mary Richards, my head nurse. We heard the alarm all night, but we didn't know where it was at, but when we looked out the window, we could see a little bit of smoke coming up in the direction of the church. So Mary told me to go down and take a look, see what's going on. So I ran down and went up the street there, and I could see that the fire was already getting going real good. And it looked like it was heading towards our church because it was working its way up, going into the Coliseum Theater. I went back up and told Mary about it, and she said, "Oh boy, maybe you better just take, I'm letting you go. You're now free. Your shift just finished." I thanked her very much for that, and I put on my jacket and ran out. But by the time I got back to the church, people were already taking the icons and stuff out of the church. But when I got there was the flame was already trying to get started in one corner there, right across from the Coliseum Theater. And they started to get everything out as fast as they could. And I helped with that. We got all that we could get out of there, including the candelabra. And they tell me, I didn't see that one. They tell me one man held up the candelabra while another person unhooked it. It was this one arm. Imagine that, just one arm? What do they call that today? Is that Jonathan got started? But they took the candelabra down and took it to where all the other stuff were going. It was on the other side of the Cathedral Arms building. But at that time then too, it was already getting started real good. So I went out and see what I could do outside. And I was on one of the hoses. I can't even remember which one. But at the same time too, someone was telling me a story, or someone was telling me about one of the firemen. He said, never mind the theater, never mind the theater. It's already going up in flames. Save the church, save the church. So the hoses, even though with what pressure they had, went over to the church, but it still wasn't enough. I have to admit that when the church went up and it came down, I cried. Just like all the other parishioners. I couldn't even hold it back. Couldn't even hold my tears back. What are we going to do now? My thoughts. What are we going to do? Where are we going to go and sing and pray? Who's going to help us? Who's going to help us? I was on the hose with some other guys, both trying to hose down the bazaar building right across from the church. And I was there and the towers started to come down. I've been in the Orthodox Church ever since birth. I was born in Todd Cannery on August the 10th, 1933. And I wasn't baptized into the church until after we got back to Sitka. Ladies and gentlemen, I can't even remember most of what I did or helped, where I helped. I know I was helping on a couple of places with the hose. Oh boy.
Shall we pass the mic? Shall we pass the mic to Walter? Thank you very much. Walter, thank you.
Well, thank you. I'm Walter Engel, as you notice on the card here. And at the time of the fire, I was the fire inspector for Sitka, the paid fire department, operating with the engineers, also civil defense director, and was quite surprised to get a telephone call saying the town was starting to burn up. It seems like we had not had adequate methods of notifying the firemen that there was a fire. We had a siren on the roof of the fire station when it was on Front on Lincoln Street, and there was an offshore wind blowing, and wind blows sound, and it blew the sound directly out into the harbor, and none of the volunteer firemen heard it, and I didn't hear it. We got telephone calls. I had been trying to get the city to buy an electronic alerting system where every fireman had a receiver in their home, and the fire station could call them and direct them directly to the fire. But I didn't have much success with the city fathers at that time. But needless to say, after the smoke went down, they were asking me all kinds of questions about where we could get a system like that. And I had the answer. We got it. Anyway, back to the Russian church. I was a free agent, that is, in the fire department. I wasn't a member of a company, but I could go anywhere I wanted and do what had to be done. And there was a small fire starting in the top of the tower by the bells. it seemed like we had a lumber mill in town at that time that had a sawdust distributor. They called it a burner, but it was really a distributor. And it used to put sawdust all over town, half-burnt sawdust. It would stack up on windowsills and it'd be flat area. And there was a quantity of it in the tower of the Russian church. And it actually caught on fire from the sparks. And so I got a forestry pack, which is a backpack that has a pump handle on it, and it holds 5 gallons of water. And I went up the stairs into the bell tower and put the small fire out. And just then, we heard commotion downstairs, and somebody says, "All out, the fire has broken into the main building." And the heat was so strong, it broke the glass out of the windows, and the curtains, and the interior of the church immediately ignited. So I started down the stairs, because I wasn't about to stay up there. And I caught the backpack on the bell ropes, and jingly jang, it sounded like New Year's Eve, or Christmas Day. And I looked down, and I could see everybody looking up to see why the bells were ringing. It was being tangled up in it. But I managed to get out, and on the way out the door, I see this bell that has a deformed hanging bracket on top that was on display inside, and it was just inside the door. So I brought it with me. It weighed about 200 pounds. I rolled it down the stairs and across the street and up on the sidewalk in front of the Cathedral Arms. And that's the one that is sitting on the deck outside the front of the church right now. Anyway, one final thing I have to say. As civil defense director, I was on the telephone most of the afternoon, and when they had the fire down, and I spent most of the afternoon writing out passes for people to go into the fire zone that had business there. And the National Guard had a guard all around the fire area. So I decided to go out and visit my relative's photo shop, which is right there on American Street, the restaurant now. And I got halfway across when I was challenged by a National Guardsman. Well, I'm the next National Guardsman myself, and I wasn't in uniform. And this soldier says, "Do you have a pass?" And I says, "No." But he says, "You have to have a pass from the civil defense director to go into this area." And I says, "Would you believe it if I told you I was the civil defense director?" He says, "No." So I turned around and walked back to my office in the fire building, got the red pen, passed for Waller Dangle, by Waller Dangle, signed by Waller Dangle, signed by the civil defense director, Waller Dangle. And I took it to him, and he says, "Yes, sir." Thank you.
I guess it's my turn. I'm Judy Johnstone. And the morning of the fire, we were on our ship that the Tantalus moored down sort of right next to A&B Hall when the siren went off at 5 o'clock in the morning. And I ran and opened the hatch and stuck my head out to see what was going on. And fire rained on my head. I had long hair, it scared me. I got to protect my hair from burning. I had a 2-year-old baby now, Taurus, and it's well in his 50s. And he was asleep in his little crib. And I knew I grabbed my baby and ran out of the companionway on deck and over onto the float and up the ramp onto Kathleen Ann Street and was running into the wind. The wind was blowing out of the north. It was so cold. It was like 0. It's so unusual here. And I ran into the wind until I found a house with somebody in it and banged on the door and said, "Take my baby." And they took my baby, and I ran back downtown. We started clearing. The less dramatic was my partner. He was there, and Sitkans and Crafts, our little store, and we cleaned our really valuable stuff. In other words, paintings that we had on consignment out of the store, and it was a joy. All over Sitka, there were pickup trucks and strong men working who would take like all our valuable stuff out of the Sitkans and Crafts and piled it in a pickup and drove away. We didn't know where. My poor husband was, at that time, city attorney. His office was on the second floor, and the fire was raining on his office. And he would not leave, because by then, City Hall had burned. So all the city records went with City Hall, which was down, not too far from the church, on Lincoln Street. And he said, "I'm all that's left of the city of Sitka. If this burns, there is no city, there's nothing left. I've got it all. What I need was city attorney." And strong men, these men came from heaven, I guess. They were wonderful. Took every single one of Chris's drawers out of his file cabinets, took them down the stairs, and put them in a pickup truck and drove them away. So maybe the hero hooks were the pickup truck drivers. They were wonderful. Sure.
Well, obviously, Sitka is a remarkable place that we have such good people here. They're so heroic. I just tear up at the thought of these people I know risking their lives, and people we don't know, people who don't get even any credit. The goodness of the people of Sitka is something wonderful. I didn't have a real job in the fire. I kind of found out about it late, and I quickly realized that my own mother was on the 7th floor of the Cathedral apartment building. That's where she was temporarily housed while her home was being finished, and there she was by herself, and I had not heard from her. Trish was in grade school, but it was a Sunday. So I went down, the cathedral was all in darkness, smoke and stuff falling out of the sky, and very scary. I went into the front door of the cathedral. Of course, the elevator was not working. I went up the 7 flights of stairs and knocked at my mother's door and held my breath and prayed. My mom came to the door, and she said, "Come in." And we went in, and we were so close to that fire, looking out that window. She was on the mountain side of the cathedral, not as different from the water side, on the front of the building, and we were very, very close to the church. And we just sat there and just watched this tremendous church go down. It was so, we were so helpless, and all we were doing was praying. We weren't talking. And I heard this click, 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 click. And eventually I said, "What is that, Mom, that clicking?" She said, "I think it's from the bedroom." And I went in there, and her Venetian blinds had been pulled down, and the stuff that held them together, the ribbon that held them together, was melting, and those blinds were just falling and falling and falling. My mom would not leave. She was pretty wise, but I really wanted her to leave with me. But no, she wouldn't. And so eventually, I left her there alone and went home. And it was a different town after that. We were more respectful to one another because we knew that people had risked their lives. We didn't know who they were, but the Holy Spirit helped us during that time. I know that for sure, and I'm glad I lived in Sitka. After the fire, the Sitka Bazaar was a marvelous store. It was a wonderful store. Mrs. Peterson, Marie Peterson, who started that store, quality stuff in there. It was no junk. It was absolutely, you buy a coat in Sitka Bazaar, it would last you for your life. It was so good. So it was so damaged, they said, everything is gone, it's water damage, you can't use it. And then after a while, they said they were getting rid of the stuff. You can go in there and buy it, it's so cheap. I didn't know, I didn't mean water only, I mean smoke damage. I didn't know what smoke damage was. I went in and bought a whole bunch of stuff I couldn't afford. But it was so cheap, and we loved their stuff. We had total trust in the stuff you bought at the Sitka Bazaar.
It was a fire sale.
You could not wash that smell. Anyway, it once again proved that we have got a special time to live in.
You're a hard act to follow, Polly. I'm Ernestine Massey, and many of you probably remember, if you were here at that time, my former husband, Walter Massey, had his optometric practice on American Street right next to the Sitka Bazaar. And so when we heard that the town was burning, he said, grab the kids, we're going down and take my optometric equipment out of there. So we drove down in our Volkswagen bus, and I had the kids, I dragged them out and put one in a baby seat because she was just about 2, and the other one was sitting in the back seat like, Mom, what's going on? She was almost 6. And we parked right in front of the office, went in, and we were dragging things out, and people, like Pauline and everyone has said, people came and helped. They put things in the Volkswagen bus because we weren't going to try to take furniture. We were just taking his equipment primarily and some of his books. And my youngest daughter slept through most of the whole thing. The other one wanted to get out and see what was going on, so I had a hard time keeping her in there. But every now and then I would peek down at the corner to see how things were going, and I saw the firefighters with ice down the front of their suits, and every now and then they would trade off on the hoses because they would be so covered with ice that they couldn't keep holding onto the hose, and they were rotating. It was just frightening. But the most miraculous thing to me that happened was the following spring, after everything was leveled, and they cleared off all of the stuff. That following spring, where the church had been, and it was all cleaned off and empty, spring flowers started to come up in the plot. And those seeds, apparently, and everyone talked about this, had been there since the church had been built, and things bloomed. And to me, that was the most precious thing that happened, because it let us know that there was spring comes around.
Yeah, my name is Jerry Helen. I'm an ex-fire chief with the fire department. I was not a paid member of the department on the night of the fire. I joined about 6 months later as a full-time firefighter. But the most interesting thing I found was that nobody knew there was a fire. There's a building right in the middle of town that's on fire, and we used to have a siren system, as was pointed out, that we Walt did. It had 2 or 3 sirens around town when there was a fire. they would, from the police department or something, would set the sirens off, and everybody would find out that there is a fire, and we had a number to call to find out where the fire was. Well, of course, not only did we know the number, but everybody in town knew the number. And it only can take so many lines into the police department or the fire department. And so I was living just off of Cathedral Street, right across from Sitka Seafoods, and our HPC, and 3 times, I think, believe it, in the middle of the night, the sirens went off because it was so cold and so windy. The sirens shorted out. Well, about 1 o'clock in the morning, the sirens go off. Nobody finds anything. Same thing at about 3 o'clock in the morning, and then about 5 o'clock in the morning, I left the house, still not knowing there was a fire. And all I heard on the phone say, Porter's. Well, Porter's had a store right at the corner where the Wells Fargo is now. Porter's also had a house up on lake, on Hemlock Street, just up from the lake. So we didn't know if it was Porter's house, Porter's business, or even Porter had anything to do with it. But so I drove down the road and I got down to Cathedral Street and then all the way down Lincoln Street and parked. When I got there, right in front of a Russell's or Max Sporting Goods, all of a sudden a gust of wind caught the spoke and put it right down on the street. And that's when I found out there was actually a fire. And there was, I think, 3 of us there. One of the engineer on duty and another guy, one of our paid guys at that time, Lyle Keene. And that was it. There was nobody else around, so we didn't even know until then a lot of people in town were finding out in different ways. But I spent a good part of that day on the roof of Ben Franklin trying to stop the fire at the Lutheran church and trying to stay on the roof because the wind was blowing so hard with what little water pressure we had. One of the local people was a volunteer at the time, Boydie Olson, was up there with me, and we almost got pushed off the building because of so much ice on it, and that's where we spent most of the afternoon. And fortunately or unfortunately did not get into the church. We were on the opposite side of the road, but it was very interesting, as Walt pointed out, that shortly thereafter, everybody wanted to know about how to get the alerting system, so everybody that needed to know knew there was a fire, and that's through his work, and hard work, we were able to get some of that and progress from there. Thank you.
Yeah, Marty Fredrickson. I was a firefighter at the fire, and like Jerry said, there was 3 false alarms in the morning. So the third one was the one that counted, and that's the one I ignored. I got downtown. Finally, I found out about it through listening to the radio, and everybody was scrambling around trying to get hoses and stuff straightened out. And fire chief said, "Why don't you back down to the waterfront and see if you can get some water up?" We had a civil defense Jeep pumper that would have got us some more water. Well, Rob McGraw and I went down there, and we couldn't get the Jeep down, so we decided to back up and tell chief that it was going to work. And on our way back out, 3 electrical transformers exploded behind us. And we scrambled out of there pretty fast. I think it was about a 100-yard record in a hurry. So after we got screwed around that, there was a lady come out of an apartment that was on fire in her night clothes, and she was worried about her bird upstairs. And so we figured, well, we'd go up and see if we could get the bird out. There wasn't that much fire around. So the bird was in a cage. The cage door was closed. I opened the cage door, sir didn't want to come out, so I reached in, wham, I got the back of my hand hit pretty hard. So, not thinking, and Chief was with me, he said, you know, I wouldn't do that again, and I'd already started reaching, and I got hit again, so I decided, well, it's a bird will get on its own if it does. So we went back downstairs, and from then on, it was just kind of hard work all day. 12 hours of it, I guess, for me anyhow. And there's a lot of funny little things that happen, like freezing somebody to the ground because he was running a hose line that was used for a curtain, a water curtain, and we had to chop them out, put them on the back end of a flatbed truck, take them to the fire hall and thaw them out to get them loose.
Thank you.
Several guys had to their bunker gear and had a little trouble when they get down the fire hall, so we had hot water poured on them so they could get into the bathroom. And little things like that you don't appreciate until it really happens to you. But anyhow, it was a long, hard fight.
Well, I wasn't here for that fire. But I've heard all this, I've been here, I don't know, since '88, and I've heard a lot of stories about it over the years. And one of our guys, a couple of years ago, did a book on it with pictures and everything. And it's back there, and we have them at the fire hall off on for sale. But I'll tell you the best story I heard, and I think, is that Boydie back there?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was Boyd that was frozen to the ground. And
I was the last one to be hauled up.
I thought that was the greatest story that I'd ever heard about firefighting.
Couldn't get me up. I was frozen in.
But he was frozen right there, and they carried him, I guess, by his arms, sat him in the bay of the fire department just so he could thaw out like that. That is one cold day right there, let me tell you. And that's right. I don't have a lot to say about that fire, except it was impressive what I've read about it, what I've heard about it. This community is great for doing that. I'll have more to say later, I'm sure. Thanks for being here tonight.
Well, panel, thank you. Those were incredible stories. I have to say that I have my own story before I open it for questions. But my dad and I were listening to the radio. What was it? KIFW, KSEW, they're two radio stations. And early in the morning they said, there's a fire downtown, everybody stay away, it's dangerous. And then about 10 minutes later it said, everybody get your downtown right now because we're in big trouble. And I think that was one of the things that really helped was to have the radio service, and that got folks to come downtown with their pickup trucks and be able to handle some of that. The other thing that I recall is looking at the fire hydrants right at the corner of the church and what was the theater, and the hoses that burned off of the fire hydrant as they ran out of water. Herman, good morning.
Got the microphone back. My brother told me that when you get the microphone, you got a good story going. Even though the manager tried to take it away from you, hang on to it. Well, I wanted to say this too. It is amazing how everyone pulled together when the fire was trying to spread. It was amazing where they stopped it before it took the whole business section down. Because there's a lot of old wood there, and old seasoned wood with oil paint on it. And just imagine how big a fire that would have made if it spread before we even got a chance to stop it. It's amazing how everybody pulled together when they started raising funds for the church. That's what I'd like to say from the bottom of my heart. to all of you. There just isn't enough room in the universe for all the thank yous that I want to give to all of you that are here tonight to hear us, listen to us, talk about the fire. Spirit, respect, and love for this little town called Sitka is what pulled everybody together. Now I'd like to say thank you again, even though the universe isn't big enough. Sheesh.
Hi, John. I just mic'd you a little bit earlier in the program. I'm Linda Williams. I'm Jean Pruitt's daughter, and it was so nice to hear his voice today. Thank you, Christy, so much for what a wonderful program this is. My dad was building the funeral home in 1966, and he was a janitor at the time. So he was up wee early in the morning, every day down there cleaning businesses, and that's how he was able to determine that something was going on, and he was able to ring the alarm. But it was must have been a really chaotic time for everyone. But the thing is that it must have been organized chaos because they formed a human chain. They organized it so that all of the icons got out of that church, all except for one, in a matter of a very short period of time. There was one icon as you walk into the church on the right-hand side that is next to the chapel that's dedicated to St. John, I think. Is that right, Father Michael? St. Innocent now, yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Just to the right. And it is still located in the original wall that it was in. It's because they couldn't pull it off the wall. So they took the whole wall out. But that was really special because at the end, when they were rebuilding the church, it still had the scrolling at the top, and they were able to replicate the scrolling throughout. So that was a wonderful thing that happened. Shirley Robards told me that during the time, right at the very beginning, my dad came out with the big holy door on his back. And he said, "Here, Shirley, you hang on to this." And he ran back in to get the other one. But I know this was a wonderful, but it was a community effort. And this is a wonderful community that pulls together in a time of need.
Herman Davis asked me to inquire of the audience if everybody, or those of you who were here in 1966, to raise your hands. Oh, quite a few, very good. Veterans. Yes. I guess some of the things that came up here at the end of the table with the official fire people. How are things different? How is this not going to happen today? You talked about the signaling system and the vulnerability of the buildings and that kind of thing. Has progress been made both in construction and or response significantly that you'd like to talk about?
I'm just going to, I could add to that a little bit. After going through this 1966 fiasco, which is what it was, everything was in the negative. We had no water, it was cold, it was windy, it was dark, the firemen couldn't show up because they weren't alerted. Everything was against us. Today, I think we're much better organized.
Thank you. Why it won't happen again, that's not necessarily the truth, but we are far better equipped, better trained, better building laws, so we have sprinkler systems, and I notice this building is. So, the chances of that happening again is very slim, but we also have a lot more equipment that's really good, and the people who operate it are really good.
I think that, like you said, could it happen again? Yes, it could happen again. I mean, any circumstance that, it could be that same circumstance. It's windy, it's cold, it's everything else. But I think the chances of it happening like that are a lot slimmer than it was before. As you said, we have better equipment right now. In fact, we're going to have even better equipment. If you saw on the front page of the paper a week or two ago, we're getting a new fire engine in a couple months, which will be a benefit to the city. We have access to the airport equipment. If in a fire like that, they would come over and help us spray water, and they have some massive rigs for that to help us. We have better water supply than we had then. There are a lot of things that are out there. We have a lot of volunteers that are available to help us. And I think the biggest thing that this community has going for it, as I think just about everybody has said or will agree, is this community is awesome. You know, we've had a couple fires that had the potential to do damage downtown, and there are a lot of folks in this building, there are a number of folks in this building that I have volunteered with or worked with or been employed with, or a whole variety of things that helped out on those fires. We had the Lutheran Church fire a number of years ago. You know, somebody spotted that fire because the fire was coming out the top of the building just a little bit in the middle of the night, and that was enough for us to get there and be able to do some great work to save that place. I think Mike White, who's sitting in the back, and I went into the building, and the organ was on fire. I heard the organ mentioned earlier. And all I can remember is that we hit the organ with a water stream, the organ went out, and I don't know if I'd ever been in the church before, but man, it's like right away, hey, that's an organ. And that's been rebuilt again. We had the Sitka Hotel fire that was downtown just a few years back. That had great potential to do some stuff. But we have some great individuals that have some great knowledge, and I'm not talking about myself, because I'm a long way from what a lot of these people are, that are willing to help out and do things to make sure that this community is safe. And the community does step up and do stuff, and they do it immensely. You know, a few months ago we had the landslide, and that was a huge thing in this community. And we were just looking at the numbers a little while ago about how many people volunteered their time to do something involved with that landslide. Now, and I'm not counting the people that brought food to the fire hall, or brought food to the church out the road, or brought food to a variety of different places, or a whole variety of different things. These are just people that, when they came in the fire hall, they filled out a form and signed their name, and they went off to do stuff somewhere, maybe at the fire hall or at the scene. There were over 600 people that volunteered to do stuff in that 2 weeks. And we had lists of hundreds of people that were willing to help. But we didn't need all that help then. We had all the help we needed. But that's the type of community this is. Just like in this fire. Everybody stepped up, and everybody was willing to do something. That's what makes Sitka special. And that is the greatest thing about this place. That's all I have now. Thanks.
There's one thing I'd like to remark on too, is many of the localities down south have things called mutual aid agreements, so that if one town has a problem, the other town comes. Well, we don't have that, and that's one of the reasons that we have such robust systems here that Dave's in charge of and the city takes care of, because they called for help from Juneau. Juneau offered help. They put a fire engine or two on the state ferry, and it got here two days later.
They didn't make it. We called and asked for a couple people to assist, and they sent one of them came over to help with our. He was a paid guy with us a couple of years ago. He came over and helped us out. The other one wasn't able to do that, just like we did when they had their big fire at the Gastineau Hotel or Gastineau apartment fire. They called and asked for help, and we sent 6 people over by Coast Guard helicopter to assist them until they were done doing what they were doing. And that's a great thing. But we don't have that easy mutual aid, like he said. We don't have more fire trucks. We don't have more people coming from hundreds of miles away to help us out. But I sort of always talk too much. But the one thing I think that we do, a couple things that we do have that will hopefully slow that fire down if it does happen in Sitka. We have better building codes, a lot better than there were back then. We have sprinkler systems in almost all of the buildings downtown. And those things, and they're inspected either by the state or by the city, almost yearly. So those are the things that are going to save our community from having those fires like that. But like I said, anything can happen. On the right day, at the right time, in the right weather, and everything else, stuff can happen. Hopefully it doesn't happen while any of us are in this town, but it can happen. So we just pray it doesn't.
And one of the mutual aid outfits that I don't think got mentioned is the U.S. Coast Guard base. They also provide services. So Al is going to grab a microphone, or there's a microphone floating out there. So if someone would like to ask a question, make a comment, stand up and show us your beautiful clothes. We're happy to have you participate.
Yeah, my name is Foy Nevers, and I was in the National Guard when that fire broke out. And I was been in the Guard from 56 to about 1972, and I was working out the pulp mill at the time, and I got a relief in and came into town right away. I was in town about 8 o'clock and was on fire all day, all night, and a lot of the other National Guard troops, and you seen them on guard duty around there trying to, so people wouldn't steal. That's what one of their primary missions was, and kind of keep an eye on people, see that we didn't get away with stuff. But they worked around the clock for about 2 or 3 days there, the fire guys.
Thank you, Foy. Walt mentioned that Sampson Tug and Barge had a fire pump on their tugboat, which came into town and assisted. So.
Also the pulp mill.
Right, and the pulp mill truck, as Foy mentioned. Yes.
How did the fire start?
Oh, how did the fire start? What was the analysis?
It was a Porter's yard goods store on the corner of Matsudoff and Lincoln. And they had a floor furnace that had been dripping oil evidently for years in the basement on the ground. So there was quite a bit of oil soaked into the dry ground underneath. And how it started, we don't know, but it was well underway when Gene Pruitt came by and saw the flames and the smoke flickering in the windows and sounded the alarm.
And
what time did Gene Pruitt discover the fire?
do you know the time that Gene discovered the fire? 5 in the morning, is that it? Yeah, about 5 o'clock in the morning.
Very dark.
And Herman mentioned that even though it was 4 degrees and freezing, that the firefighters did not complain. And as far as I know, no one was seriously injured in this either. Is that right? Nobody died. Nobody was seriously injured. Next.
My name is Sarah Williams, and during that fire, we live in a little cabin right where the state building is, and we could see the fire from there. And my kids were small, so at this 6 o'clock in the morning, and my husband said he's going to go down, and so I stayed home and took care of my kids, and I'm very proud to say that my husband was inside the church saving the icons, and he said that they had to chase him out before he left. That I was hoping to see him in the film, but then he wasn't there as some people know that I lost my husband a couple of years ago.
Other comments? Hal?
How many days did it take?
How many days did it take to put the fire out? Oh, how many days? How many days before they got the fire?
They had the fire under control by 3 o'clock. Just smoldering again.
Okay, so about 10 hours, something like that.
I'm walking over there, I got a drink. Did Helen Mercado come? 3,200 people lived here at the time.
Al down in front here too.
Did Helen Mercado come? She was hoping to come. I've got to tell a story she told me. She knew Governor Egan at the time. They were friends. And so Governor Egan flew over and said, Helen, let's go look at this. And they took her out and he said, this is terrible. It was just very bad. He said, I need a drink. So they went to one of our establishments and had a drink. He said, let's go to another one. This is terrible. So they went and had another shot. And while he was there, he says, I'm going to call the president. And Helen looked at Governor Egan, come on. Picks up the phone from the drinking establishment, I guess. You know.
Which one, Hal?
I'm not going to say. Use your imagination, those who were around then. And he calls President Lyndon Johnson, who answers the telephone. Helen's listening to Governor William, Wild Bill, right? Egan, talk to President Johnson about the Sitka fire. That's how far it went. The gentleman here had.
Thank you. My name is Judson Thomas. My mom and dad were established well in the Orthodox Church. And my brother Gerald is one of the leaders in there, Gerald Thomas. I know Herman remembers that pretty well. And at that given time, we heard the fire by radio. And so my dad got all excited. And so my brother Danny, myself, and Gerald, 4 of us began to run on the icy road. It's cold, like they said it was, very cold. And we ran up there. By that time, the fires heavily engulfed the Porter's store. And we ran, and they said, help, help, we need help, carry out the icons. Help, somebody help. And my brother Gerald said, come on, let's go. Come on, Dan, let's go. Judson, come on, let's run, hurry. The fire's reaching the church already. So what happened is we ran in there and we packed out the icons. Sometimes it took 2 of us to carry out some of them. And it was my mom, I don't know how she got up there so fast because Mom was slow and so icy. But she stood out there wailing and crying. We were crying, packing out the icons and being bad over the church. But we made it in there. Finally, they said, let's have a chain of men pass the icons down. So we did. And they told us, it started to get pretty warm in the church. Smoke was coming in. And, but anyway, it was part of the whole thing. We stood there and watched the church burn down. It collapsing from the very top. The towers are coming down. And I stood there and wept. Family wept with us, and so many others were there weeping. But we felt so bad. Just to talk about it makes you relive it again. But we loved the church so much, we could not believe it was happening. Then when we heard they were going to rebuild it, began to put our hearts healed over that whole situation. And it was a real blessing to hear that they got together, people got together, and all the community began to come together. You know, the community is a big family. I'm so thankful that we have a community that's a family together. When something happens, we all get together. Even strangers, not knowing each other, but we help. Even financially, we help. That's a real blessing to help one another in this committee. I'm so thankful to be here. But it's been an honor to say a few words on the behalf of our church. And at the time, we were excited. We had this all, like we said, all full of smoke, and our clothes are all smoky and dirty and muddy from the soot, etc. But I'm so thankful that we were able to did a little bit of help to help out the church. And we felt so bad when the Porter's business went down and the other businesses went down. But thank God, nobody got hurt. And thank you very much for the little story. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. These are the words of Martin Strand. He was here at the time, and this is what he has to say. Experience in photography, and the one lesson I taught myself was be prepared for anything. I would process black and white negatives and print them in the next hour. It was thrilling for me every time. What was my day like on January 2nd, 1966? I got the Sunday morning shift on the radio station because I didn't drink and get up in the mornings. We signed on at 7 a.m. Sundays. We lived at 407 Sawmill Creek Road. I got up and had a brief breakfast and grabbed some 8x10 prints to look at while I worked. The weather lately had been cold and clear. 19 degrees was the temperature with a slight wind from the east. I had my Pentax H2 on my shoulder when I left the house. Fire trucks were heading downtown, and when I reached Sawmill and Lake Street, I saw the reason why. Flames in the sky were starting to build. I rushed to the radio station and signed on and gave a general fire report. Soon, I was relieved from work and headed downtown. The Coliseum Theater was burning when I started taking pictures. I had Tri-X film, and I remember doing the Tower apartment fire in 1965. And this helped me make manual settings for my camera. 88 millimeter, 1.9 Takumar lens at 2.8 at 1/25th of a second. I also had my Mamiya C33 twin lens reflex loaded with Tri-X and the 180 millimeter telephoto lens. I would alternate between cameras and take time to load the 120 film, which was only 12 exposures. I also had Kodachrome slide film in another camera. The wind was blowing toward Japonski Island, and live sparks were carried over the water. I photographed helpless firemen who tried to get water from the frozen water hydrants. Already, Franklin's Triumph building was catching fire in a big way. The fire also moved rapidly down Maxwell Street all the way back to Jack Calvin's print shop. The really big concern was St. Michael's Church. Heavy, bright sparks were coming across the street to the church. A line of people were taking everything that wasn't nailed down out of the church to the Sitka telephone building garage behind Cathedral Apartments. First, the roof started burning. I was at home with the babies and could see down the street a little ways from where the Williams were. And if you want to have a picture in your mind for the rest of your life, is to watch the spire the longest, tallest spire clothed in metal, fall as one piece to the ground.
It's about 2 minutes to 8. Hal, you want to take one more and then close us out?
Sure.
This is a wonderful night for all of us, especially for us at St. Michael's Cathedral. The story of the fire is central to our life. It is the story that is told to all of our visitors who come in the summertime from around the country and around the world. It's central to our story of life, not only of the cathedral, but also of the town of Sitka. It is a story that everyone who comes in wants to hear. And it is a proud proclamation that those of us who work in the cathedral in the summer are able to tell of the wonderful camaraderie, spirit, and loyalty to preservation and to tradition and to each other. And it is to that we tell the people who come to visit us all of the bits and stories that everyone has kind of touched on tonight are all part of the story that we are able to tell them. And everyone goes away quite touched and different, I believe, by not only hearing the story of the fire, hearing the story of the rescue, but also seeing the restoration of the cathedral and what the community did in its restoration. And so for us at St. Michael's Cathedral, we are blessed to be able to be in the center of town for you. We are blessed and honored to be able to carry on that tradition that has always been here. Our tradition began as Russian, and Russian became Russian and Klingit. And with that, you hear the flavors of different languages in the services of Slavic and of Klingit and of Aleut and Yupik, especially for our Mount Edgecombe High School kids who come and sing in their own language. The only thing I can say, I think, in the sense of the life of the cathedral, is that it's Russian, it's Klingit, and it is American. And it is truly an American-Russian Klingit temple of worship for God. The only thing is that, especially visitors who come from Russia in the summertime, that I am quite a anomaly. They really can't figure me out. Because they will come to me and they'll say, "Oh, you're the priest here." I say, "Yes, Father Michael." Yeah. "Oh, and then the question always is, "Oh, you speak Russian?" Yeah. And I say, "No." I was raised Episcopalian. So then you have these people like myself who converted to Orthodoxy. And they said, "So you don't speak Russian?" I said, "No, I'm Irish." Michael Patrick Boyle. And I just don't know what to do. I just don't know what to do. So that's part of our story and our future and our blessing to be able to be the cathedral in town for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Father Michael. Would you please give our panel a round of applause? Alan Frederickson, Ernestine Massey, Gary Helen, Marty Frederickson, and Dave Miller. Thank you all so much for coming.
Well, you know what? I wish every high school kid and grade school kid in this town could see that. Because I saw a spirit of community come out of that. That's the theme here. A spirit that we are in this together. Thank you all very much. You did an absolutely wonderful job. Thank you for what you did back then, the bravery and the desire that you had to rebuild the town. I'm going to leave you with a piece here. It's on the back. I'm going to read this little paragraph, and I want you to think about this as you leave. Imagine a nation that doesn't protect its historical treasures. A family that doesn't pass down stories of its ancestors to their children. A community that doesn't celebrate its past and provide a place for visitors to experience local history. Imagine a world without museums. Thank you very much for coming.